Have you ever wondered what a true masterclass in education looks like? Not just for learning facts, but for actually shaping character and building a community from the ground up? Well, today, we're pulling back the curtain on the profound and honestly deeply compassionate teaching methods used in Al-Madeenah. Let's dive in.
Everything, and I mean everything, started right here, with this one powerful request. Before anything else, this idea, this prayer for more knowledge, became the absolute bedrock for the entire community. It established learning not just as a nice-to-have, but as the essential tool for moral and spiritual growth. This was square one.
And this is so crucial to understand. Before any other major principles were laid down, the Prophet emphasized the absolute necessity of learning. Now, why was that? Because in the Quran, knowledge is framed as the direct opposite of disbelief. It was the very first quality that set humanity apart.
So the move to Al-Madeenah, it was a total game changer. For the very first time, there was stability, a real homeland. And with that security came a new top priority, a deep, systematic education. We're talking everything from complex laws to the simple etiquette of daily life. The goal was to build an entire society from the inside out.
Okay, but having knowledge is one thing. Getting that knowledge across to someone else so it actually sticks, that's a whole different ballgame. And the Prophet was a master communicator. He used these brilliant techniques to make sure his lessons weren't just heard, but that they were really understood and remembered. Let's get into how he did it.
So check this out. It really came down to three pillars of clarity. First, repetition. If something was important, he might say it up to 3 times to really help it sink in for memorization. Second, his speech was incredibly deliberate, slow, clear, and easy to follow. And finally, his timing was perfect. He taught when he knew people were ready to listen, not when they were tired or distracted.
And you don't have to take my word for it. This quote says it all. This is a direct account from his wife, Aisha, and it just paints such a clear picture. Can you imagine a speaker whose words are so carefully paced that you could literally count them one by one? This was never about rushing. It was about making learning feel effortless.
Okay, so we've covered clarity. But what about the really big ideas? The abstract spiritual concepts? Well, he had this incredible gift for making the unseen seen, for taking these profound ideas and connecting them to the real physical world in a way that made them impossible to forget.
I mean, just think about this verse for a moment. This is a divine parable at its most powerful. It takes the most solid, unmovable thing we can imagine, a mountain, and uses it to help us feel the incredible weight and gravity of the Quran. It's a technique that forces you to reflect on something abstract in a really powerful, tangible way.
And this method actually has a name, Emthal, parables. It's really a core strategy for any great teacher, right? Knowing how to build a bridge between a brand new, theoretical idea and something familiar and practical from everyday life. That's how knowledge goes from being an idea in your head to something you truly understand.
You know how some things just click when you can see them instead of just hearing about them? Well, he knew that too. He understood that learning goes so much deeper when you engage more of your senses. So he would often use simple but incredibly powerful visual aids.
Here's the perfect example. Picture this. One day, he just draws a single straight line in the sand. This, he says, is the straight path. Simple enough? But then he draws all these little crooked lines branching off of it, explaining that those are the paths of distraction that try to pull you away. With just a drawing in the sand, a complex spiritual journey became crystal clear. Now, these lessons were not a one-way street. This wasn't him just standing up and lecturing. He actively engaged his companions, turning them from passive listeners into active participants in their own education. And his favorite tool for doing that? The simple, thought-provoking question. Let me ask you the same question he asked them. Do you know who the broke one is? See, it immediately gets your attention, right? It creates a bit of suspense. You want to know the answer. They thought it was just someone with no money. But what if I told you the real answer was so much deeper than that?
So why was this so effective? Well, look at all the things a single question could do. It grabs your attention, it tests what you already think you know, it gets your mind working, encourages you to reflect, and it perfectly prepares you for the lesson that's about to come. It was a seriously strategic teaching tool.
And what's so brilliant is how he adapted the technique. Sometimes, he'd ask a question to test their knowledge, to see where they were at. But other times, he would ask a question he knew they couldn't answer. And what does that do? It creates this vacuum, this powerful sense of curiosity, and a real desire to hear what comes next.
And this brings us to what might be the very heart of his entire teaching style, the emotional intelligence that was woven into everything he did. This was all about making sure that guidance and even correction were always received with love, never with fear or shame.
So think about the difference here. On one hand, you've got correction by public shaming. You single someone out, you embarrass them, and you create resentment. But on the other hand, you have his method, correction with mercy. He would often address the action, in general terms, without pointing a finger at the person. The behavior gets corrected, but the person's dignity is protected.
There's this incredible story of a man, new to the community, who accidentally spoke during the prayer. Now he was terrified, expecting to be harshly scolded afterwards. But instead, the prophet just gently and calmly pulled him aside and explained the rule. The man later said he'd never had a better teacher. The lesson was learned, and his dignity was completely intact. That's the power of gentle correction.
So that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. We've seen methods that are clear, tangible, interactive, and just deeply merciful. The question for all of us today is, how can we take these timeless principles of compassionate teaching and apply them in our own lives, in our leadership, our education, our families? How can we also help shape character and build community for the better?